Hi, Paul from Apex Mindset here. Got a lot to talk about today. Be a good time. I didn't really test my mic out. Well, we should be good though. So yeah, we're going to talk about. Read a little article about how her ex was bigger. All right, got people dying to hear about this guy's wiener size. Yes, what was his wiener size? Was it huge? Was it above average? We'll clear up these burning questions you guys have about wieners on this today's podcast. It's not really a podcast, but we're gonna call it a podcast, I guess. Well, it's definitely live, right? We're definitely live. So if you guys have any questions, of course, throw them in the chat. Throw a super chat with that, okay, so that I can see that you're asking a question and I'll be sure to answer it. And there's no guarantee that I'll notice it if there isn't a super chat attached. But yeah, this will be an interesting topic today because this is an issue that dudes deal with and couples deal with, and it's not talked about very often. But we're not just talking about wieners. We're going to talk about, I want to try to censor myself as much as possible within the first 30 minutes of this thing, so YouTube doesn't just shadow ban it like they've done my channel. But we are going to get into a lot of different issues, not just about that, but about male female nature and stuff. And I will say right off the bat, for those who are new, that I'm going to make a lot of generalizations about women. I'll make a lot of generalizations about men here too. And that doesn't mean that it applies to every individual circumstance. Okay. So there's this tendency when we talk broadly about, let's say, male or female nature, and we make broad statements, there's a tendency to believe that I must mean all women or I must mean all men. And that's not necessarily the case. So individual circumstances do vary. This is why I do consult sessions with people, because the general answers are not always the answer. Not to mention, this is why I run things like my mastermind group, where you guys can get really dialed in on seduction and frame and understanding this stuff. Spending a year with me and working on that will get your skill level very high. It'll get very high skill level in interacting with women, interacting socially, persuasion, and to be able to not just get the girl, but keep the girl. And if you decide, or you guys mutually decide to break it up, then also to recover from that quickly and move on. And so that's what happens in the Seduction and Frame Mastermind program. And it's a lot of course material and one-on-one work with me. And the reason why you do something like that is because general things don't always apply. In fact, they usually don't. Okay, there's usually individual circumstances. We just want to have a general understanding so you can know what decisions, how to interpret your individual circumstance, and what, of course, decisions to make. Now, with that said, we'll get into this little article that I had read. It was just a narrative on some chick asking for advice, and we're going to break down some of this stuff. So she wrote, last night. Oh, sorry. Before I continue with that, the link will be in the description for you to book a free one-on-one consult and more or less interview for the Frame and Seduction Mastermind group if you're interested in doing that. So if you think that might be for you, go ahead and hit that link. It's not in the description as I'm talking right now, but as soon as I get off, I'll add it to the description of this video. So reading on, so a woman writes, last night and she's a 22-year-old female. He's a 26-year-old male. She writes, last night, my boyfriend and I tried anal. Am I banned yet? I don't know. Can I say that? I don't know if I can say that. It was both our first time doing it, and we both enjoyed it, me especially. My boyfriend noticed this and afterwards asked why I hadn't tried it with my ex, to which I replied without thinking, because I don't have a death wish. Uh-oh. So he Confused, he asks me what I meant. Realizing I kind of trapped myself into a corner, I was just honest and said his D was too big. My boyfriend froze and turned to me and asked how that'd be possible since I told him during sex that he was the biggest I'd ever had. Oh boy. Okay. That's that's what she said. I'm sure you all heard that one before too, huh, guys? I kind of just shrugged and said that was just dirty talk that I thought he would like to hear. you guys, you guys in the chat are hilarious. R.I.P. just he got really upset and said I was an a-hole for saying something like that and not meaning it. I told him I was sorry and that I liked the size of his pee more than my ex's. That didn't help. He left my apartment in a fit of rage and won't return any of my calls or texts. I feel bad, but I think he's overreacting. I talked about it with a friend, and she said she tells her boyfriend the exact same thing, even though it's not true. Am I the a-hole here? All right. So, yeah. So, what do we got in the chat? Same thing as a fake orgasm. Yes. I think this chick means well. Yeah, we'll break that down. Okay, I want to address this one. Nothing to worry about when you're packing heat. Oh, yes. So, you're going to have the guys in here. Nick, I'm not really sharpshooting you too hard about this, but I am going to be a little bit okay. Like, oh, you got to just have a huge dong because guess what, guys? On the internet, my dong is huge. I'm going to tell everybody how huge my dong is on the internet. I'm cool on the internet. Okay. Let me tell you. Yeah, there are guys of various sizes. You know, you might be big, you might be medium, you might be small. But just because you're big, that doesn't mean that she wasn't with somebody bigger. And just because you're big, that doesn't mean that she wasn't with somebody better. Okay, so this applies to you, whether you think you are King Dongenstein in my chat or not. And again, I'm not being the dick just on you, Nick, but there's a lot of people who think this way, you know, and then it's a common thing for men, right? I'm gonna get into lies that men tell and lies that women tell. But men tend to overcompensate with stuff like this. And one way of handling the we'll say anxieties over not being endowed enough is to act like you're huge or say you're huge. But I will tell you from having consulted thousands of guys, there's guys out there who are really big and in the huge category who are still self-conscious. Because if the girl that they're investing in is a size queen and has had bigger, well, that's going to make him self-conscious, right? It's all subjective. Or if that guy, if she's had better and doesn't feel like she can, you know, have the kind of sex with the bigger guy like she has in the past with somebody different, maybe, you know, especially looking at things that were really intense for her with other dudes, there's always a reason to have some anxiety and retroactive jealousy. Okay, so don't think you know, and yeah, I'm glad you're being a good sport about that one, Nick. I'm not trying, like I said, I wasn't trying to be a dick to you or anything, but yes, but just don't think, you know, that it's only guys with, because that's, by the way, guys, let them think that out there. I say them, I'm not talking about the girls that are watching and spying on us right now, the girls that are in the you know, the clubhouse meeting, hearing what the boys are talking about. Of course the girls are welcome here too, but I'm talking about, you know, the general public out there. This is why we don't have these discussions out there, because if you mention anything about anxiety or concern, not even anxiety, just a concern, because what is it? It's a concern about a woman you're with seeing something else or somebody else is subjectively better. That's a real concern, guys. That's not a fake concern. But women in female social order, gynocentric social order, wants to shame you into asking that for asking that question, and they will use the word insecure to do the shaming. So I've tried to like eliminate even the word insecure from my vocabulary because it's just a shaming word. I mean, it's a word used to call a man weak without saying that he's weak, call a man inadequate without saying he's inadequate, and basically put it on him or blame him for any concern he might have, legitimate or not legitimate, right? So if a guy is concerned, let's say, about a guy in a girl's past and her perceiving that guy is better, that could be unfounded, right? It could be not real. It could be his own anxiety and stuff and something he has to deal with. Or it could be something that he objectively needs to look at, because so often women lie to themselves about those things and they in turn lie to men about those things. So don't allow, you know what I mean? Um, anyone to shame you and call you insecure. And don't assume that talking about size and these issues mean that somebody else has a concern about this, like this particular guy here, whatever. I mean, obviously the X is bigger, but don't assume that he doesn't have big dick energy or he's not, whatever. That's all bullshit. You're falling into female, but you're acting like a female. If you're sitting here saying, oh, dude, you know, guys who are worried about this, you know, they must have small dicks. Okay, you are probably have a small dick yourself, and you're also falling into female behavior. You have a vagina. You don't even have a small one. You have a vagina at this point because you're acting like one. You know, so talking, you know, when a guy's like, man, I got an issue or concern, and if that's your response, do you know what I'm saying? Is to, you know, break the guy down and say, well, he must have this. Guy, he just bought a truck or a sports car. He must have a small ding dong. If that's you, you're a woman. All right. So just take your womanly self, go look in the mirror and say, gosh, I am really a woman right now. And maybe transition while you're in there and come back out and be a man. Okay. Because people do things and people have concerns and people have jealousies or they have things. Sometimes it's their fault they're doing. Sometimes it's somebody else. It's not because they're weak or this and that and the other. People also buy sports cars, you know, lift weights, buy trucks, and, you know, like power tools and toys. And that doesn't mean that they have small D energy. All right. That's female stuff. Okay. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, and so I'm glad. So anyway, what do we got here? Hey, okay, cool. So let's cover a few things about this. Now, women, for thing number one on this, let's break this down. First of all, let's look at his mistake right in the beginning. Why would he say that? Okay, so he put himself in a position where he was having an issue, right? Like he had an anxiety crop up. All right. So why would you, after having a great experience with your girl, ask about her ex, or, well, why didn't you do this with your ex? Maybe that's a real question, but that's not a question at that time. Do you know what I mean? And so like you're gonna come across as weak, and, to use the term I don't like, insecure, whether it's a real concern or not, or a thought, when you bring that thought up at the wrong time. So for your strategy, guys, that's not the right time to do it. When you're not feeling confident about something, and we've all made this mistake, when you're not feeling confident about yourself and about something, and you're having that welled up anxiety feeling inside of yourself, that is the wrong time to start asking questions. Okay? Because anxiety is not seeking truth. Anxious thinking is only seeking information to confirm itself. So when you ask a woman something from a place of anxiety, no matter what she says, is going to confirm, you're going to twist it in your mind to confirm the fears or anxious beliefs that are driving and fueling that behavior, that feeling that you're having. And that's not necessarily truthful or objective, then, is it? So you got to step outside and step away from that, or take that question that you have and set it aside for later. I'm not saying not to ask it. I'm not saying not to have that conversation, because sometimes burying it's not the good answer. But you need to have some patience and tactical patience when you're dealing with your girl. You take that aside, you think about it, and get some clarity within yourself about that. And then with that clarity, you ask yourself, is this a thing that I want to ask and get the answer to? How important is it? What are the outcomes I'm looking for when I'm about to ask this question, or whatever? And then you do it from a place of strength during a time in a place where she's open to having a conversation with you, because she will not tell you the truth, or she's going to react like this woman reacted when you ask these questions in the wrong context. Okay. And he clearly asked it in the wrong context. It sounds like it was right afterwards. All right. And so, and what happens is women get sort of a anxiety with this as well, because instinctually, if they're honest about their sexual experiences and proclivities and desires, and they let the guy know that there may be something different in it, and she perceives it as somebody was better than he was, that meant maybe death for her. Okay. Like in our evolutionary past, a girl wasn't going to be like, hey, ogre, Og was better than you were just at the sex a minute ago. And then ogre just hits her with a rock, right? Like, it's not right. So we have a very violent history our human history is very violent, and women would definitely get beaten to death in our history for doing certain things. This woman would clearly be beaten to death in cave times. Okay. Not saying she should be, but that is what would have happened. And so there is a level of insecurity that will happen in a woman when these questions are not asked in the right way. Meaning, if she senses your anxiety, her anxiety is going to go up. And then what she's going to do is one of two things. She's going to shit test it, which means she senses the weakness, and then she basically says something to attack that weakness to see if you're really weak or not. All right. So that's a strength test, right? So she'll do that, which now is really bad for your anxiety, and those anxious feelings you're having. That's just going to fuel that. Or she's going to clam up and start lying, or start omitting, or just get very nervous about how she's going to present the information, which is going to give you the impression that she's not telling the truth. Because remember, your anxiety is there to confirm itself. It's not there to find accurate information. Okay. So my first actionable piece for you guys is never do what this guy did, because you're never going to get the right answer. All right. If she were to say, I just didn't, she could have answered it in a number of ways. And there's a lot, depending on his level of anxiety, he might not believe just about anything she says, Now, that's his fault. Okay. But he's not the only one. She was definitely a bigger dick head, a bigger a-hole, which is the question than she was. So let's break down some more things too. Now, first things are, okay, yes, she is an a-hole. So on top of, okay, no, he should not have asked that question at that time in that place. Where is her level of femininity here? Okay. Women are valued for their femininity. That means making a person feel good and having sympathy and for them and their emotions. Now, we get too used to, as men in the West here, putting up with a lack of femininity, and women who, when they don't feel good, stop trying to make their partner feel good, because they like mutualness and they want fairness, unless, of course, it's at their expense, and then they don't want fairness. All right. So again, I'll make that caveat from the beginning. Okay. This is not all women. This is just a tendency of women, particularly westernized women. All right. So it's like they want fairness, but not unless it benefits them. And when it doesn't benefit them, they're not interested in fairness. Number one. And number two, they don't, they don't feel comfortable. Right. So like a lot of women will bag, they don't have this internal strength or confidence or self-awareness or just even social conditioning to say, I'm going to bag my bad emotions here because I can see that he's having maybe some bad emotions here too. And I don't really want to ruin this experience we're having just because he's having a bad emotion. And so I'm going to answer this in a way that's not going to stimulate some bad emotions for him. And really what he wants to know is that he's the better lover, he's the better partner here. And I need to make him feel that way, despite that he's having a moment of what she might call insecurity. But see, that femininity is not what women do. A lot of women do anymore. And so, so instead they respond with shit test and vindictive behavior, which is what she responded with. Because I don't care what mental gymnastics she wants to do, her response was vindictive. Okay. And so she just blurts out without thinking or having any sympathy or empathy for that matter for what this guy is doing, what he's asking. Oh, because I didn't have a death wish. So she was flippant about the fact that her ex was bigger in the pants, right? And so in her entitled mentality here, she thinks that, well, I mean, that's his problem to deal with and not mine. Actually, no, that's your problem to deal with, honey, because he can decide he doesn't want to deal with your problem anymore. And that's what I would recommend he would do in this case, is dump you on your ass for being a liar and for being inconsiderate and making him feel sexually less adequate than your previous partners. And so that would be what I would recommend. And so you can sit there, girls, who want to do this kind of thing and be entitled and think, well, it's his problem. Well, it's your problem when you're 38 years old and you can't find a guy because you railed through the marketplace and guys don't want to be with you anymore because they don't really have the confidence of believing that they're, the best guy for you because of all your experiences. And you do nothing to make them feel any differently because you don't have femininity. So when girls act that way, I'm not saying this guy should just dump her outright, but it's a big red flag of how she reacted. And I would consider that dumping is in the future, if not outright, if she can't, I guess, change some of these ways of communicating. Because if he's got concerns, it is up to her to mitigate those concerns. Now, if he's irrational and crazy and beating her up and, name calling or like slut shaming her, stuff like that, well, then no, okay, we're not talking about that. But if he is, and this goes back to fairness, women want fairness until it doesn't benefit them. So she wants to be able to conceal her sexual past because she's been unable, if it's so the case that past partners were better in certain circumstances, she, isn't able to find that better match. So she wants to be able to conceal that, lie about it, and be accepted by the current partner. Of course, until Briffault's law, the current partner no longer serves her, and then she finds somebody else, if that's what happens. Either way, though, she wants this current partner to accept her without knowing the entire truth of everything about her, and she's not willing to freely answer those questions. And when she does it flippantly and kind of puts in his face and makes it his problem. Whereas, she, of course, would want him to tell the truth about things about himself. And this is what I mean about double standards. Many women, not all, but many women, they believe in a mutual sort of relationship and almost in equality, which, by the way, equality doesn't really exist. But their concept of fairness is being treated mutually, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's not always going to work. It's not going to be applicable. Like, for example, my 11-year-old isn't allowed to say the F word and drink whiskey. There's a double standard there. There's not going to be a mutual thing going on. If I want to have a glass of whiskey and say the F word in an adult conversation and my son's around, that's because I'm an adult and he's a kid and he knows that. Now, some parents try to keep everything mutual, which means I'm not going to use adult language and I'm not going to do an adult beverage around the children because everything has to be equal. I don't really agree with that. Now, that's, of course, a situation for another debate another time, but I don't agree with that because I think that things are never mutual. There's never equality. There is fairness, but I think fairness has to do with principles and effort, whereas it's not necessarily all mutual treatment, but women are wired on an evolutionary level to see fairness as that. And so at any rate, but they're only wanting but they're also wired to be very opportunistic. So fairness happens on their terms when they think it's fair, but they don't necessarily want to recognize that that fairness that they require, that mutualness when the shoe's on the other foot, it doesn't benefit them, or if it's uncomfortable for them. So that's just something, to sort of keep in mind. Now, number two thing about this is she was cucking him. Okay, so what do I mean by cucking? So cucking's a lot of definitions. I've done some videos on it. No, women are wired to cuck men. Men are not wired to cuck women. Women hate it when I say this because they want things to be mutual, but things are not mutual. There are things that guys do to women that can do to women, right? That are very terrible and very bad. Okay. And there's a wiring for men to do certain things that are terrible to women that, isn't the same as what women would do to men. So there's that, right? But there isn't any mutualness here. Like a guy defaulting to violence or coercion or force, which can show up in a relationship and get the police called on you, or it can just show up in an argument where a guy is posturing and being intimidating. That's a default mechanism for males. Now, that can turn into some very terrible results for a female. And you don't generally see, although there are a lot of women who do physical violence on men, they're generally not as successful at it as men are when they decide to do physical violence on women. So women get injured or killed more often in relationships than men do. So there's an example where it's not mutual and it's not favoring the woman. But there are other circumstances, though, where it's not mutual and, it's not favoring the men. All right. And cucking is an instance of that. Now, if you choose to put too much attention, let's say, into another girl or something, she'll perceive it as cucking, maybe, where you're putting another girl above her. She may perceive it like that because that's how she thinks. And it's hard for her to put herself in your shoes and see things how you're thinking. But usually, and there are times when guys will put another girl above their own girl, right? The person that they're with. And that can happen. But what I'm saying is the cucking aspect, the need or necessity to do that, though, to pick one or over the other, to pit the two within competition with each other, that necessity is a exclusively female evolved trait, not a male one. So not to say men can't put one woman, let's say he cheats on somebody, he's in an emotional relationship, he's got a side girl that he's like really into, and so he ends up putting her above his wife. Like that can definitely happen, but that's and maybe that's in a way that's like cucking, but it's not really cucking. It's just putting somebody above the other person, and it's not fair to the person he's in a commitment with. So he's not being fair. He's not treating her well, right? Or how he should treat her. However, it's not cucking in the sense of where he has to do that in his brain. That's not how he operates. Do you know what I mean? And so, whereas women have to do that because they are hypergamous. So they have to pit two men against each other, and then one of those men has to win. Okay. And in every circumstance, she's choosing a man. She's cucking somebody in her brain. It's either the other guy she's been with before and the other guy she could be with, because in her brain, she has to believe this guy's better than the rest. Or it's, okay, I'm with this guy because I settled, but man, my ex was better. Or man, I wish I could get with Steve from accounting at work. And that's where the cucking goes the other way. There is no equals. They don't look at things like, oh, it's just a bunch of dudes and not experiences. No. If they start going through incident after incident of every guy they've been interested in, there's a hierarchy and someone is at the top. And so because of that, somebody has to be cucked, essentially, in her mind. She has to be choosing one over the other in a sexual sense. And that's why it's called cucking. It's choosing another over another in a sexual sense, because, and getting off or aroused because the other person is perceived as better. And that's the other part of it. There's a level of arousal she has knowing she won when she's with her best partner, you know? So when she's with who she perceives as her best, there's a feeling of winning, and there's a feeling of self-esteem and validation. We call it validation sex. Rollo Tomassi calls it validation sex versus transactional sex for a reason. And so there's a level of internal validation she feels when she's with a guy that she sexually perceives as her best option. And so her arousal for that guy isn't just because he's hot and he smells nice and he makes her feel good. It's because he's also better than the other choices. Her arousal goes up when she perceives a man as better. And her arousal goes down when she perceives another man of her past or someone that could be in her future as better while she's settled in with somebody different. And so that's the nature of the evolutionary aspect of this. Okay. That's the nature part of this. When I say cucking, okay, I'm talking about nature here. I'm not talking about simply just putting somebody above someone else. Guys do that all the time, but it's not coming from the same instinct. All right. And so now that we've cleared that out, she was basically cucking him, it looks like, in this. And I say that because she was comparing both partners in her head. All right. Now let's review, why did she do that? Well, because the guy pushed her to do that with a stupid question at the wrong time. So again, there's a level of responsibility the man has in this situation by asking the wrong question at the wrong time. Bad game move, because you, after this great sexual experience, you're causing or pushing her to compare you in another lover. All right. She can't help but do that because it's her nature. And now you're bringing this up right in this moment, which means that in this moment now she's going to compare you to her previous lover. All right. So now where was she at then? In her mind, she's thinking, on the one hand, I'm happy to have experienced this new thing. I really enjoyed this new thing. But then on the other hand, so-and-so was bigger, right? And in some ways, she may perceive the bigger man in this case is better. And so she was comparing the two, and maybe she's not sure who wins yet. So in her irritation of not being sure about that, in her irritation of sensing weakness, she strength tests him with her flippant response. Okay. And that flippant response is designed to test his strength and to have power over the guy she's with. And so because of her need and desire to have power over him sexually, that's why women cuck the guys they're with. That's why women oftentimes will turn down the alpha or not continue with a guy that is their best experience sexually, because they don't think they can make it with that guy. They don't think it can work. And so they'll end that relationship, or they'll keep it a short-term sexual fling. And then they keep that information in her brain, and she does it to have power over her partner, because a lot of women cannot have freely surrender to an alpha. They don't trust the guy. Maybe it could be one reason, or the other reason is they just cannot, they just have, their anxiety goes up too high, and so they have a hard time freely surrendering to a guy that they perceive as their best. And so they leave that guy, they settle with someone who is not their best or hasn't been their best, or maybe a combination of men that she thinks she could get her in her past are a bit better, and it's a bit of a settle. But this way she can tell herself, well, I'm, valuable to him. I'm doing him a favor by being with him. You see what I mean? I'm not out of control emotionally about this relationship. I have the power in the relationship. He wants me more than I want him, is essentially what it can be. And she does this by cucking him. She does this by knowing, and she may never ever tell him, but she knows that the dude with the bigger D in her past, okay, we're past 30 minutes now, so bigger dick fucking Billy or whatever, bigger dick Chad or whatever, that was her ex. She holds on to that information, and every now and then when she's uncomfortable, drops it, into her partner, just in order to have power over him. At least in this case, that's what happened. And so that's not very nice, is it? And that's not good. And that's not a chick. That is a major red flag. And that is a potentially break-upable offense, because she may be settling with this guy, not seeing him as her best. And if that's the case, he either has to be in a relationship knowing that's the case, and knowing that she'll always have one foot out the door and a little bit of power that she can hold over him, and that means she won't surrender to him, and that means she will not have the level of we could say submissiveness and femininity that he would want in a woman. And so, the chats are funny. But so is that worth it? Or is there somebody out there who will perceive you as better? Right? Do you settle with somebody who sees you as not the best? I don't recommend it. I recommend that if she doesn't see you that way, you get out of it. And she's giving it an indicator that may be the case here. Not 100%, but it's not looking good, right? And then the other part is, do you want a woman that's not a very nurturing partner, that can't recognize? Do you have to be super strong dickhead alpha all the time? Or, when you have a fucking moment, can she actually be a good human being to you instead of stepping into her emotions and shit testing you all the time? I mean, it's a question, right? And you have to ask yourself, the woman that does that to you, does she really see you as her best? Is she capable? If she feels the need to test you like that all the time, you know what I mean? So that's another thing, right? So some points on this here. Women are opportunistic. Okay. They will settle for the perceived best deal when someone else, they will settle for the perceived best deal at the time. And that means that though someone else could have been better in her past and could have been a better option, maybe even her future. But right now she's settling with this particular guy because for now it's the best deal she can find. Meaning she hasn't been able to replace and keep the guy from her past. And she's open to it in the future and may leave that guy in the future if she thinks she's got the sexual market value and the confidence to get a different guy. But he's the good for now guy. See, that's the opportunistic part of it. She can get the relationship and all of the benefits of that from the good for now guy. And maybe the sex is good, but it's not her best. But if she can maybe switch to her best, maybe she will. Or maybe she'll occasionally cheat, not tell him about it every year or 6 months. Or maybe, maybe, right? There's a lot of ways it could be handling it. Maybe she'll just become miserable in the situation and asexual because she's not aware of her behavior. There's a lot of things. But her perceived best deal may also be to settle with the lesser guy so she can have power in the relationship. So some women are concerned about having their goals and needs met, and they don't think that the alpha that they surrender to can, you know, facilitate those goals and needs for her. So she'll settle with somebody less. So she's not as emotionally invested, has power over him both. And the power happens sexually. Okay. That's a big place where power happens for a woman, is that she overpowers him sexually, just up here in her mind psychologically, knowing that she could get better guys than this guy, that she could last longer, is more sexually, powerful even in the bedroom, that she could hook up with guys and, you know, that guy would maybe be better, right? And so on and so forth. That's where women get a lot of power. And it's very scary for a woman when she's with a guy who can get better, what she may perceive as good, or if not better than she is. Or, because like, for example, most women are used to being able to go to the bar, they could get a guy to sleep with her, no problem, that same night. And then the guy that they're with, though, he doesn't have the game skills or attractiveness to be able to do the same. It would take him a longer amount of time to get a girl, and that girl may not match up or be even in the same category as the girl that he's with, right? And so most women are used to having the power of their own attractiveness, because of the way that males pay attention to females, and males are so easy to get in the bedroom, right? But a lot of women have a ton of anxiety when that role is reversed, or when it's flipped around, meaning that guy is just as capable as she is at getting a decent looking girl to sleep with them. And he could do that in almost as short amount of time as her. If it's not just that same night, it's within a couple nights maybe, but he, in short order, he could 1-to-1 match her in being a slut. Okay. If that guy is very attractive to a woman, but she's also very intimidating to a woman. And a lot of women cannot handle that power. So for some women, the better opportunity to achieve their goals and then reduce their anxiety is to be with the lesser guy, the less attractive guy. All right. And women do it all the time. And then they cuck that guy, meaning they let him know that so and so is a little bit better or bigger, or this or that and the other. And she won't say better, right? She'll leave it ambiguous because, all right, we'll get to my next point here, which is that people lie. All right. So people lie to themselves usually, and they lie to each other. That's very common. All right. So anyone that sits here and says, well, I'm not a liar, I've never lied, and, my partner's great and she doesn't lie to me, and nobody's lying and only liars lie. All right. You're actually fooling yourself. You have not been red pilled when it comes to how human interactions work. Okay. People generally BS themselves and they BS each other. That's a fact of life. And people are generally working on programming and social conditioning and habits, and they're not intentional about their behavior. That is a fact as well. All right. And so I'm not saying that it gives you permission to be dishonest in your relationships or dishonest with yourself or to be a liar, so to speak. You want to be as authentic as you can and as self-aware as you can. And no, I don't recommend going around telling blatant lies, but you have to do what you do understand that human beings are more complex than what, I don't know, after school, after church education or catechism or some such, moral class for kindergartners would want you to believe. All right. You're not in kindergarten anymore. You're not in the first grade. Okay. You're an adult now, and you have to understand that human beings are a bit more complex. Right. And so women lie, and they usually lie to themselves first, then they believe their lies. And because they're designed, and those lies are designed for her to feel better about herself. Okay. And women lie due to their own pride and trying to be the good person, trying to be the correct or right person. And that's why women lie. And they usually are lying to themselves first. They're gaslighting themselves first, and then they do it to the outside world and they believe it. And so that's why women are better at lying than men are, in my opinion, because they actually believe what they're saying. All right. Again, I'm not talking all women all the time, but that's a generality. Okay. Whereas men lie to manage perceptions due to their own egos. Okay. So when men lie, it's to be perceived as a capable or superior person. So, and what that, and men are usually consciously aware when they do it. Okay. So men generally lie by commission more. So they'll actually tell the lie more often. Whereas women will lie through changing information around to make people perceive things differently than they were, which is gaslighting in a way, and they'll gaslight themselves. They do it through omission by not telling certain details or focusing on certain details, and then being hyper focused on other details. And they'll do it through deflection, meaning, well, this isn't that important, and well, your idea about that doesn't really matter. And here's what really matters, right? And so that's how women will generally do it, just so you know. And so when it comes to this situation we're looking at and what you should put up with as a man, whether this guy should have stayed with her or not, whether she was the a-hole or not, got to understand that she will lie to herself to be with you if she feels it's the pragmatic answer, and if she feels like it's the right thing for her, until she doesn't think it's right anymore. And then she'll tell herself another set of stories to be able to be away from you and then be with somebody else. She is the, designer of her own perceptions through her emotions. Okay. And she's not usually self-aware about those things. Now, some women can get very mature, very self-aware, and be elevated from that. That's hard to find though. Okay. And so just keep that in mind. And guys too are not very aware of what they are doing. All right. And I'll tell you this, whenever you think you're aware of yourself and aware of things you're doing, you're in danger, because you're probably not. Okay. There's probably things that you have and habits, behaviors, belief systems, perceptions that are just not exactly correct. And if you think you got it, which I've been arrogant enough to think that at various times in my life, there's usually something that will happen that'll tell you that you don't. All right. So women are going to lie, and they're hypergamous as well. So they're going to lie to you to make you, perceive you. They want you to perceive that you might be her sexual best, but they don't want to they don't always, a lot of women don't want to let you perceive that as being 100% true, because they'll think your ego is going to get too big. What does that mean? They don't want you to have power over them. So they don't want you to know that you have her vagina. They don't want you to know that you basically own her vagina, right? If they let you know that you own it, okay, that you are that apex alpha who owns it, then they lose power, and they don't want that. And so even if you have that, a lot of times they don't want to let you know that, okay? But a lot of times you don't have it, and they give you the perception that you might. And so this is where what most women do and how they lie about this is they're not clear about, if asked bluntly, yeah, they'll say, oh yeah, you're the best sex I've ever had, honey. Oh, your dick is perfect. It's just the right size and you do just the right things. Oh, I'm so turned on by you, right? They'll do that to make you feel better, because that's what this woman did. She lied to him during sex and said, oh, I've never been, I've never, what was it? That I was the biggest I've ever had. She lied during sex to make him feel better and more confident, so he'd perform better. That was pragmatic for her. But the reality is then she was holding back information, lying through omission. And her other behaviors, I'm sure, was letting him know that that wasn't exactly a true statement. And see, that's what women like to do to have power over you. They like to manipulate the situation where they make you question it just a little bit. And they do it through omission and not being clear on certain statements or things, purposefully not giving you certain compliments or saying certain things about you, holding back certain things. And then, of course, in other circumstances, giving you certain little drips of confidence and assurance, right? And so that makes you wonder, like, am I really or am I not? And women do that absolutely intentionally. Do not sit here and think that they don't know what they're up to, because they do. Okay. And they may not be self-aware, but they know that here's how they'll rationalize it. Oh man, I had really good sex with them, but I don't want to act too excited because then he's going to get a big head about it. This is how the thinking they'll have. They're not saying, oh, let me deceive him and have this grand plan. No, that's not what it is. But they're fearful of losing power, right? And so they don't want to lose that power, that sexual power in the relationship. So those are the kinds of thoughts that they'll happen in their head. But they know that those thoughts are happening, and then they will withdraw on, or omit that information that, hey, last night you blew my mind sexually. Like they'll omit that from discussions or from telling you, because they don't want you to get a big head. Okay, so that means they don't want you to have the power. But then they'll allude to other situations, especially in your moments of insecurity, that maybe somebody else was a little bit better, had something better, said something a little bit you didn't. Oh, but no, it's okay. You're better. You're the best. Or I wouldn't be with you. Ha 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 ha. Okay, sure. So when that 35-year-old's telling you that, and she doesn't look like she did when she was 21 and having those experiences, she wants you to believe that, yeah, she wouldn't be with you pragmatically if these other guys and experiences when she was in her early 20s were better. Yeah, we know better than that, right? So any sense. So that's something, right? You just need to be keeping in mind. Now, I know I'm stimulating a lot of anxiety with this show here, and that's not fully my intention, but we got to speak truthfully about the things that are going on, don't we? So here's where you have the tough, you're tasked with the tough thing if you are dealing with somebody and wanting her to be a longer-term fixture of your life. Longer-term fixture in your life, rather, is that it's up to you to perceive along her 5 core hypergamous needs, which are sex, emotion, security, paternity, or being a good dad, and legacy, and being willing to grow old with her. You need to decide if you are, based on her behavior, her words, and things you know about her, if she truly is, you truly are perceived by her as the best in those 5 categories, or not. And if not, why? Are you, and even if are you perceived by her as the best, and she's just afraid of giving that up, and those situations that are a little bit ambiguous, or are you perceived really just not as the best, and she's maybe having to do mental gymnastics to get there. So she wants to see you as the best because she really likes you, likes the relationship, but really though, she has to do a lot of mental deflection and lying to herself to get there. Like, these are things and questions you need to look at, and then you need to accept the relationship or move on from the relationship and keep your commitment open, because she will settle, okay, with you if she perceives it's the best deal in that moment. And if she has emotional attachments, she likes you, she'll settle with you to her own demise if you let her. Because if she doesn't perceive you as the best deal, she'll settle with you, and then she will treat you as if you're not the best deal in the relationship. I'll repeat that one more time. If she settles with you and you're not the best deal for her, then she will treat you like you are not the best deal for her in the relationship, which means you have now settled with somebody who is not treating you the way that you would want to be treated as a man, and by giving that commitment away. It's not worth it. You know what I mean? It's not worth it. Now, I'm going to say a few other things here and go through actually some statements, and then we'll have to close off. But so some other things, I looked at some different opinions, and I'll look actually quickly at the chat here. Don't see any supers or questions, so that's cool. I'm going to move on into, because tight on time, I want to get all the information in. But yeah, let's go over some women were asked, in just different forums, different things. And let's look at some of the things that were said here. Okay. I'm going to present 3 different things. So here's the first one was, so the point I'm going to make, all right, here is that, it's by being her best is how she perceives it. There's an objective element to it, but it's not fully objective. She is not a scientist. She is not running math problems to see if, mathematically, according to some, sexual market value formula, you equal out to have the most value compared to guys she's been with. This is not what she's doing. And a lot of guys in this sort of men's help space, and you guys in these different places, you like to do that. You like to turn it into a math problem, and it's not. It's her perceptions and her emotions and how she feels about it. So that being said, there is no objective measure for what the perfect dick size is. And whether or not bigger is better is really up to the individual. Now, I will say, and you can reference I did an hour-long video, talked about dicks way more than I ever care to talk about them, right? Where I went into all the studies, and objectively, women do want bigger than average, but they don't want the biggest, okay? So if you want to know statistically, objectively, what do women want, like on a bigger scale, like the scale of most women, is they don't want the guy who's small. That's a fact. They don't want the guy who's average. They want a guy who's above average. But they don't want, huge. So bigger's not always better. Okay. In that case, that's number one. Now, number two is that doesn't matter, because for a small percentage of women, bigger is always better. They're size queens. So for maybe 10 to 15% of the populace, maybe 1 out of 5 chicks, maybe 1 out of 6. I would say probably 1 out of 5 now, because of pornography and women using penis size to shame men. They think it's like Texas now. Bigger's better always, right? It's a perception thing now. It's being socially conditioned to believe that. But, so because of that, maybe about 1 in 5 are like size queens. But that means there's another 4 girls that they're not interested in gigantic. Okay. And so you just don't, if you're not the biggest that girl's ever had, she's a size queen, and you're not the biggest she's ever had, you need to kick her to the curb then and find somebody else. All right. That either you're the biggest for that girl because of her experiences, or she just isn't, size isn't the most important thing for her. Okay. So I'm gonna read you 3 little vignettes to make this point, okay, on how subjective this is, because you guys don't need to be self-conscious about this, which is really what the point is. All right. So first thing reads, my ex was, this is a girl writing this, right? My ex was the biggest I'd ever been with. And honestly, before we had sex, I wasn't all that concerned about his size, as I thought from his personality, we would find ways to have fun in bed. So she was worried about him being too big, I guess. Yeah. I was pleasantly surprised to find that he wasn't just huge, but really good in bed as well. And I loved him, which only added to our overall chemistry. I'll admit, though, he was an effing narcissistic a-hole. Oh, of course, because they're broken up now, so he's not. So he's narcissistic. This is, by the way, when she's been alpha widowed, sometimes they get really resentful on that ex. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. I'm just saying, let's be objective, right? But I seriously had a hard time giving him up for the fact of his D size. And then she puts in parentheses, that might make me a bit shallow. My current boyfriend is between average to above average, depending on how excited I get him. That being said, I knew that finding someone with a big D was fun in bed, and I loved it. It would be pretty daunting. Okay. That being said, this is hard to read her grammatical errors, but no, she knew that finding someone who was the size or bigger of her ex and who was good in bed was probably not likely. So she settled with her current boyfriend. All right. So when I got with my new boyfriend, I was on the fence because I like him a lot. He's extremely sexy, but initially was reluctant because I had gotten used to a big dick. I had to make a decision on the matter because I don't like fences. What she means by that, but whatever. So with deep thought, I threw caution to the wind and eventually dumped my ex. Oh, so in other words, she was mate switched to this new guy. And so, okay, we'll get into that in a second. It got easier over time. Both have good stamina, and I have no complaints with my current guy. Sex with the ex was mind-blowing, but I often left me feeling like what we did, he could or would do with someone else, because I was never sure he loved me. Sex with my current boyfriend is pretty intense because He's either a great actor or the love I feel when we have sex is real. Really, though, the long and short of it is, no pun intended, he can be as big of a jerk as the other. I miss that guy sometimes for that very reason. It is what it is, and it's what you make of it or convince yourself it is. Her grammars was terrible, but she's interesting points here she makes, right? So it's what she says, it is what it is, and it is what you make it or convince yourself it is, right? What is that? She's illustrating that women lie to the fact that women lie to themselves. She just stated that the bigger dude was better for her in bed, right? She had better sex with that guy, but he was too much. She had too much anxiety with that guy to keep him. Maybe he was a real asshole, right? Maybe that's true. Or maybe she just had anxiety, or maybe it's both. Like, who knows? But she left him to settle with somebody who is less sexually satisfying and powerful. We won't say satisfying because she says she likes the sex with him, right? But he's not as sexually powerful. So what happens? She misses the other guy. She has to convince herself that this is better for her because he's more loving. You know, the other guy was more intense and bigger, better in her mind, physically speaking. Okay. So if I was advising these guys, this guy for some reason, I don't tell people what to do. They have to decide. But I mean, my opinion here would be, I would never be in a relationship with this person. You know what I mean? This would never be somebody I would continue or be with, because she definitely sees the other person as better and she is definitely settling. So that means she's going to treat her current boyfriend exactly like that. Now, let's read a different vignette and a different opinion. So, different chick says, actually, I prefer average size penises to really big ones. See, women have this thing called a G spot. It's responsible for vaginal orgasms. All right, so then she gets into orgasm and clitoris science, which she doesn't really know that well, but other than her own body. Anyway, so I'll skip through that part. But she says it's not that the G spot, it's not that high up. So a man with a really long penis can bypass it completely instead of stimulating it with his penis head. Also, if a man has a really large penis, he tends to slam into my cervix repeatedly because his penis can reach that far. And that's an ouch for me. Also, if a man's penis is too thick, it's not pleasurable unless you have a very, very, really wide vagina, which I don't. It's going to stretch you out. It's not going to feel that pleasant. I definitely would not prefer a small penis, but I wouldn't prefer a very large one either. Give me average any day of the week. Okay, so she's G-spot focused. All right, so that was for her. Then average through her experiences has been better for her. All right, so I want you to see a difference here. The guy who was huge, well, the girl who had better experiences with huge guy is going to associate huge dicks as what she wants. And that's where her attraction triggers are going to be. And so unless a guy who is smaller gives her a better sexual experience and pleasure and blows that out of the water, her default is going to be to these larger sizes. That's just where triggers are going to be. Is that one necessarily better than the other objectively? Not really. It's just that has to do with her subjective experience, how she perceives it. Now, girl number 2, though, her subjective experiences have been, if she's assuming she's not lying to herself, and it doesn't appear that way in how she wrote it, is that the average is better because they hit certain spots for her better. What that means, though, is the guy attached to that thing hit certain spots for her better, gave her a more pleasurable experience, and the guy attached to the larger ones didn't do that for her. So subjectively, average is better for girl number 2. If you're with girl number 1 and she's talking about her experiences with you and her ex that way, I would recommend not being in that relationship. Girl number two, though, if you're the guy who's, giving her those experiences and that's how she perceives it, what happens? She perceives you as better, right? So sexually, she's going to be very enthusiastic about you and not thinking about her ex-boyfriend. Okay, so now I'll read one other vignette here, and then I'll close with this. So I'll start it here where she's reading about an experience she had with a guy who was really small. So this is a different girl now. She writes, then I reached in his boxers and felt not a lot. His penis was tiny, not just small, side of average, but really small. I felt a wave of disappointment rush over me. Finally, I was in bed with a hot guy who I had a crush on for ages, but he was the size of a mushroom. He just looked me right in the eye, winked, and said, it's not about the size, right? And he winks and laughs. A little amused mastery. Wow. His utter confidence in his performance was a total turn on. I think other guys faced with his shortcomings would just fumble on, hoping I'd ignore it. But the fact that he acknowledged his size, wasn't phased at it by all, only made me curious to carry on. But then within seconds, he started going down on me, pulling my clothes off, and he gave me the best head of my life. He was so genuinely into it. And what he did to me, I ended up orgasming in minutes. And even when we began having sex, he made up for his lack of size by playing and stimulating himself with me with his fingers. And he was so good with his hands, I just kept orgasming. Afterwards, we lay back in each other's arms. He nodded and said, you weren't expecting that, were you? And I admitted I was not. With this probably boosted his ego even more. This is literally the best experience I've ever had in my life in bed. And so there's another situation where the girl is going to tell you that she wouldn't probably necessarily, I don't know, she would prefer this guy with what he has over any other size, and he is not packing much, but he knew how to compensate for it. And so she's going to look at him as the whole person as better objectively. And so if she was writing about that objectively about that guy, that's a guy that doesn't need to be self-conscious about himself. And because he wasn't, and because he was confident, he had her in his frame. You see how that works? And so she adopted his frame, which is, I'm going to give you the most mind-blowing sexual experience of your life, even though I'm probably the smallest dude you've ever been with. And by just going in with that self-confidence, this girl was obviously convinced to the point of orgasming a lot. So my point here is not to worry about those particulars and, no pun intended, shortcomings. However, do not choose a woman who is going to perceive you, whether it's big, small, medium, whether it's any of your types so that you are any of this stuff. You're not picking someone who perceives you as less than someone else. All right. And that may be due to her experiences. And she may be very sad to lose you because she put herself through a bunch of experiences and can't find something to top or even match it. And she likes you and therefore pragmatically would settle with you. But once again, you're not going to settle if you want a good relationship. You're not going to settle with somebody who doesn't perceive you as the best, because they don't perceive you as the best, then they won't treat you like it. And that's the thing. You guys need to be just aware and not anxious and not self-conscious. Okay, outcome independent, but aware. And when you perceive that genuine desire is there and you move her into that desire with your frame and your seduction skills, but there's that objective nature of it too. Like objectively, you had three different girls. One would say she prefers a smaller guy. One would say she prefers average. Another would say she prefers huge. And so the objective nature of it matches with her subjective, perceptions based on the seduction that you employ, right? You make sure that you are vetting the stuff out, because a woman is going to lie to herself just to be with you. She will have that tendency. And again, I'm not saying all women will do it 100%, 100 of the time, but it's just the instinctual drive. And you will lie to yourself too. You'll like her, you'll have your emotions, and you'll just tell yourself, oh, yeah, she likes me for me, right? That's you lying to yourself. Or you'll say, oh, sure, X was better because he had this or he had that or he was taller. And you'll spin out of anxiety and lose your relationship. And you're not being objective there either, are you? So maintain your outcome independence and objectivity. All right. Don't accept a woman who doesn't see you as her best. And you know what? And maintain, and don't do things to fuel your anxiety either. All right. So make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you're subscribing to my channel. And link is in the description if you want to learn more about seduction and dial yourself in and work one-on-one with me. Thanks again, guys, for tuning in. Catch you later.